I thought I've had a pretty jacked up 2+ years, and I thought that if I could make something positive come out of that, um, then telling my story would be worthwhile. On November 1st, 2014, I sat down to dinner with my 2 boys and my husband, and just after dinner my husband complained that he wasn't feeling well. He passed out. I called 911, and shortly thereafter he went into cardiac arrest. I was the first person to do CPR on him. The first arriving unit was an ambulance, and it was a while for the ALS unit to arrive. For lack of better words, I ran the arrest until that ALS unit arrived. And during that time, I couldn't take care of my boys, and they watched the whole thing. It was personally and professionally devastating to me. Not only had I lost my husband, and my kids had lost their father, but I felt like I had failed. Biggest call of my lifetime. I hadn't been able to pull out whatever it took to keep him alive. I don't know that I will ever stop wondering if there was something I could have done. I've do my best to resign myself to the outcome, but it's a real challenge. That was November 1st. We made it through the holidays. Just before New Year's of 2014, my boys and I took a trip to New Jersey to visit a very close family member. She had been a widow for 12 years, so we had some really meaningful conversation about what that means and how my life would change. It was a wonderful trip, and we left kind of feeling like, there was just a little bit of positivity. And we got a call 3 days later that she had died in her sleep. But that wasn't the end of it. 2 weeks before my husband's death, we had lost a father of one of my son's friends. 2 weeks after my husband's death, one of the fathers on the lacrosse team also died. In January, Eric Stesiak was killed in a line-of-duty accident. In the same month, we lost Nick Garner, who I had worked with at Station 2. That spring, Chief Brothers had his cardiac arrest. And in April, John Lazuski's son was shot. In May, I was being prepped for trial to testify in a homicide investigation. That was a call that I had run, a particularly gruesome murder. And so I relived that several times in my head and for the district attorney's office. A good friend of my sister's died suddenly. Jimmy Baker here at Station 3 went into cardiac arrest in the parking lot, and he survived. But I was, upon hearing of that, I was pretty much panic-stricken. The idea of being at work and having somebody I know go down in front of me just filled me with sheer terror. For me, it felt like the entire fabric on which my life had been built was coming apart. Well, I found myself really having trouble sleeping, couldn't seem to find joy anywhere I looked. I felt completely and utterly worthless. My kids were struggling. I was struggling. I didn't feel comfortable doing my job. It was horrible. I had been in counseling for several months because I wasn't going to ask my kids to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. Even though I went and spoke with her regularly, I didn't have words to describe how badly I felt. I was short-tempered, having a really low threshold for frustration. I withdrew from a lot of things after Paul's death. I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to go home and go to bed and stay there. And I started thinking about ending my life. And there was a time when I thought about it pretty much nonstop. I decided on a plan, I purchased what I needed, and then I waited. And for a while, having the means alone was consolation. It was comforting to know that there was a way out of the hell I was in. People say, how could she possibly do that to her kids? They already lost their father and that, what? Just want to explain how skewed my thinking was at the time. When my kids were doing okay, I told myself that they had survived Paul's death and they'd survive mine too. And when they were doing badly, it was because it was all my fault. It was lose-lose. But there were moments in there where I was scared. I was in a really bad place. And when I finally told my counselor, she made me promise to go see my physician, and she put me on medication, which I hated. I hated being on it. I thought that I needed it. The only thing I didn't hate was the effect it had on me. And it just seemed to raise the threshold for being completely overwhelmed by everything that was going on. But one thing that made a difference was to try to look at my experience as a mental injury and not as a mental illness. To see it as something that happened to me, not as some inherent weakness. Today I think I'm healthy. I'm off medication for the first time in 2 years. I've also learned a number of skills, strategies really, to deal with things that happen in my life. I have to make time to visit with friends, because if I start to isolate myself, everything else gets harder. I need to exercise regularly. I have to get as much sleep as I possibly can. I try to get outside, because there's something about being outdoors that makes you feel grounded. And I have to build in kind of downtime. If I try to pack too much into my days, I become overwhelmed. Then I start to feel like a failure. Then all that guilt and that other stuff, it comes back around with a vengeance. I'm much better at balancing my needs with my kids' needs and the needs of other people around me. But I have no idea what life has in store. And for the people watching this who are young in their careers, who think that they're impervious, just remember, you can sit down to dinner and your whole life can change. What I want people to get out of this is that healing is possible. That there are people out there who are willing to listen and who are willing to hear what you're going through and who understand, who get it. If I ever need them again, medication and counseling are out there for me, and I won't hesitate this time. So I guess that's the message I want to bring to people, that there is healing out there. You just have to go find it.